Doctor Who is fighting Nazis. Depending on how you look at it, that sentence is either going to not make you raise an eyebrow, or it's going to make you suck air between your teeth. On the one hand, Doctor Who fighting Nazis is basically Tuesday, or Saturday, and fighting Nazis in general is a pretty great idea. But in terms of real historical Nazis, Fenric dealt with the Brits, Russians, and one guy in cosplay. Dr. Dances was more about the sexual repression of women in the time period. The whole point of Moffat's latest story, Let's Kill Hitler, is that the Doctor is a children's hero who does not belong anywhere near the mustachioed twat. And Spyfall Part 2 sure is a Part 2 that exists. The 60s came close to doing this kind of thing for real, but given how the historicals back then were basically survival stories, where the Doctor had to walk away from massacres, I struggled to think of a story that could have aged worse, other than the hypothetical special where 10 met J.K. Rowling penned by Gareth fucking Roberts. Please, sign my petition now to release the Rowling Roberts cut. Do you think Netflix will buy it? Don't make me go and get 7 to slap you. You thought 12 and Thin Ice was bad? When 7 hits racists, he draws blood. Anyways, by August 1991, one can only imagine that they thought, fuck it, the show's off the air, have all the Nazis you want, Terence. Timewyrm Exodus's first smart move was being set in an alternative timeline where the Nazis won World War II, rather than straight up doing a historical set in the Reich. I imagine it was also slightly less of an oversaturated genre back then. Picking up where we left off, Ishtar is now the Timewyrm, which is a little weird, but between this and Bad Wolf, titles like this seem to be the trade-off for being granted godlike powers by the Time Vortex. I like to think mine would be something like Entropy Sloth. Anyways, she goes back in time, immediately gets trapped in Adolf Hitler's brain, karma. Hot on her trail, the Doctor and Ace arrive in London in the present day to find out history's gone all Wolfenstein. Despite this not being a historical, it generally follows the Spooner model. Everything you could expect to be in a story about the Nazis is here. We've got history lessons galore, the Doctor's collecting false identities. 30 pages in, and the lieutenant that took him prisoner is now bringing him caviar. That's very Hartnell. I've seen 7 described in this as core Doctor or generic, and I think I disagree. I could picture Tom Baker with some of these lines, but here, the Doctor uses time travel to manipulate events, plays sides against each other, and I think Dick's nailed 7's tendency to ramble off, yet also somehow close down and say nothing. Kind of like someone getting high for the first time and bumping into a cop. I've not read that many Target novelizations, but I'd say a skill that Terence picked up from doing all of those was capturing an actor's little tics and mannerisms. And obviously he had more to work with from 7's TV run than 8 in the TV movie. Ace is sadly mostly relegated to just asking questions and getting captured, and she's a little inconsistent. She gets hung up on the murder of a Nazi officer at the start, but then she's rooting for the Doctor to have Hemmings executed. This leads to a monologue about power corrupting, and along with the fact that the Doctor actually screws up fairly often in this book, it makes me wonder if this is Dick's acknowledgement that Nazis and Doctor Who don't really belong together. Confronting Nazis is actually a really big deal for Ace. They're a trigger for her due to them killing her friend Manisha when she was a kid. Her trauma comes to the surface in stories like Colditz, but that kind of thing is absent here. As it stands, I think this kind of thing was just a little bit too complex for most Classic Who writers at the time. When a VNA gets Ace right, that's when I think the series will really have come into its own, at least for me. But yeah, this definitely has what was missing for me from the previous 2 novels. It has a seamless structure and pacing. This is a book you can really get through quickly, and it has tension. There are some bloody good cliffhangers in here. There's also some interesting commentary. The story equates SS indoctrination with zombification, which is a really good metaphor. There's Nazis with superstitions, Nazis as a cult. You've got the hypocrisy, the fact that one of the mystic leaders is a disabled man. And I love the detail of the Timewyrm getting trapped in Hitler's mind and just finding that horrifying. But real Ben, if the Timewyrm is trapped in Hitler's brain, how did she change history? What a wonderful, awkward question, Parody Ben. It's revealed that the villains from the war games, the warlords and the war chief, have been secretly helping the possessed Hitler gain power since at least the Munich Putsch. As the Timewyrm became more and more unstable, changes were made to their plans, which resulted in the Nazis winning World War II with nuclear weapons. Not like this! Yeah, I see how this happened, in fairness. I mentioned last time that one of the biggest problems was the Timewyrm herself. She's kind of like the Wire. Interesting powers, but an absolutely unbearable personality. And Dix was left trying to make this villain interesting. And instead of trying, he locks her in a cupboard and basically replaces her with better villains. His villains. But you can see the clear problem with this. It's an obvious pitfall of injecting fictional alien events into real-life human atrocities. There's no mystery as to why the Nazis came to power, and the fact that people listen to Hitler is not a point in his favour, it's a mark against human beings. I'm all for media pointing out that the Nazis are incapable of success, but we already had an avenue for exploring this in the first part of the book, the one set in the alternative timeline. Timewyrm Exodus isn't so much unbuckling its seatbelt as it is deciding that it needs to leave the car immediately because the A27 looks like a really great place to practice somersaults. And of course, we have to have the Doctor put the original timeline back on track, so yay, he makes sure World War II happens. Though here he's grumbling about it, which makes it, I guess, better than Rose's attempt at an optimistic ending. I'm doing my best not to turn the series into just me repeating fan gossip about infamous moments in the Wilderness Years. Whilst it's important for anyone trying to analyse these works to point them out, the mistakes made in here, or in Timewyrm Genesis, or in The Eight Doctors, they are old wounds. Useful stories about sex, violence, and fascism definitely exist, and it's not a bad idea for Doctor Who to be the one trying to tell them, given the state it was in. Adults were the only ones who could buy these, were off the air and out of children's line of sight. So this was the time and place to try and tackle this subject matter. When a franchise goes into new territory though, growing pains are, while not excusable in this case, they are understandable. So despite all the complaining I've been doing so far, I'm not writing these books off just yet. Next month we're going back to the EDAs, and I'm really looking forward to this one.